Hi everyone, I'm Kari, this is Thomas, and this is our kitchen. The recipe I'm going to show you today is for a marble cake. Many of you would know it from childhood, but this one is a bit different. I hope you enjoy it. It's absolutely diabetes friendly and keto, so let's get into it.
In order to have an evenly baked cake, we would always want to preheat our oven in advance. As for the ingredients for this recipe, I've included them all in the description below. For the flavor of this marble cake, we will be using cocoa and the raspberry sauce I prepared in my last recipe. The main flavor would be vanilla, and we'll do the main batter with vanilla. The first step is to butter our pan. I'll be using a standard loaf pan for this cake, and I always like to butter it first, although I'm still using baking paper. For the baking paper itself, I usually cut it to fit the bottom of the pan, but this time I'll show you another trick. This would help you to take out your cake much easier when it's baked. I'm adding my paper to the bottom, it sticks well to the butter. And now for the additional trick, we're adding 2 pieces of baking paper sideways. This way we can use them as handles later on when we need to take out our cake. For the batter itself, I'm taking my mixing bowl and starting with the eggs. I'm actually using 5 medium eggs for this recipe, but you can reduce the number if you're using any larger eggs. When the eggs are mixed together, we can add our sweetener. I've listed my favorite sweetener in the description below. And then adding the vanilla. Remember, the vanilla is the predominant taste for our cake, and we'll be adding the additional flavors later. I'm adding about a tablespoon of vanilla, but you can do less as well. Then I'm adding the butter. If you don't like to use butter, you can use coconut oil or any other oil you prefer. Now I'm moving the mixture to my stand mixer. The first thing I'm adding is the baking powder. I usually tend to forget this, so this is the first thing I'm adding now. Then the coconut flour. And then I'm adding my dominant flour, which is the almond flour. I really like its texture for this type of recipe, so I'm sticking with it. We would be looking to get a very creamy batter, so you can start adding some of your milk, or in this case I'm using double cream. We can start adding this to the batter. As mentioned, the texture needs to be quite creamy, so you might find yourself adding more and more of the milk or cream throughout the recipe. If you like, you can switch this up for any nut milk if you prefer to use non-dairy products, or you can just use coconut cream as well. If you're using a stand mixer, please make sure that there is no flour left on the sides of the mixing bowl. It might add additional lumps to your batter later on. Then I'm starting to split up the batter. Remember, we'll be adding 2 additional flavors, so we'll need to split the batter into 3. The first one I'm doing is the cocoa. I'm taking out about 1.5 cups of the batter and adding the cocoa. Again, for the correct measurements, you can check out the description below. I've noticed that the cocoa has made the mixture more dry, so I'm adding more of the cream. We need it to be very creamy, almost like mashed potatoes. You may notice that the main batter is now getting lumpier. Again, we need it to be quite smooth, but when adding the raspberries, we don't need to add any cream. The raspberry sauce is quite smooth, it has a lot of moisture in, so it would make the batter creamier already. For this recipe I'm adding some food coloring as well, just so we can get that bright color at the end. I'm ultimately aiming for the color to be very close to a raspberry. So after mixing this in, I'm actually checking with one raspberry to see how close it is. You don't have to use any unhealthy food colorings, there are plenty that are plant-based. Now for the last step, I'm mixing in the original vanilla batter and adding a bit more of the cream so we can make it creamier. When we are done with this step as well, we can start putting together our cake. Here you can see my 3 batters and my pan. I'm starting to scoop out the batter with a measuring cup. You can use anything that's comfortable to you. I've decided to start with the white batter so it would frame out our cake very well. Then the raspberry and then the cocoa. If you notice that any of the batters are getting a bit lumpier, you can top up with some more of the cream. I decided to do 2 layers of each and to end with the chocolate layer on top. I think it makes it look very pretty. When adding the final layer, you need to make sure that you have enough to cover the whole area. And if you're making this as a surprise cake and people are not expected to know that it's a layered marble cake, you can kind of scoop it around to make sure that it covers the whole area. And at the end we're putting in the raspberries. There is no particular order to this, you can be as creative as you want. I put this in the oven for between 70 and 90 minutes. Getting ourselves organized to take out the cake. It took my cake about 85 minutes to get ready, and by that time toothpick would come out absolutely clean. When you're done, you can leave the cake to rest for about 10 minutes in the tin. My cake is still resting in its pan. I'll be doing some whipped cream for the side. I used about 250 milliliters of double cream, so everything that's remained I'm whipping into cream and adding a few drops of vanilla, mixing those in. I'm scooping the cream into another little jar. Now we're ready to put also our cake out. First, you can try lifting it slowly, just so it is not sticking to the sides of the pan. And then you can use the additional strips we added to lift the cake. I think that's much smoother, especially because we've created something on the top that we wouldn't want to ruin. I would suggest using this method so you don't have to turn the cake upside down or do anything funny with it. I think that works perfectly fine. It doesn't look like it from this video, but it actually rested for another half an hour to an hour. You can leave it to rest for a bit longer so it doesn't get smushed when you cut it. I'm taking out some of that lovely raspberry jam that we prepared before and putting it on top of the cream. And now for cutting the cake, as you see it's quite soft still, Take care when cutting it not to ruin the top. And these are the pieces we're getting. I think it looks amazing. I think the pop of color is really nice and no one would expect that. You can scoop some of the cream on top, some of the jam, and just serve it with tea and coffee. I hope you liked this recipe. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more of my recipes, click the subscribe button so you can stick around and see my next videos.